It all started when King Charles I dissolved Parliament and began ruling as an absolute monarch. Naturally, this caused him to rapidly lose the trust of his people. By 1640, Charles was broke. He reconvened Parliament just to demand new taxes, but after dissolving them twice in 2 years, Parliament had enough. Tensions exploded, and by 1642, Parliament actually organized its own army to fight back. This marked the beginning of the English Civil War, also known as the Puritan Revolution. The war ended with the shocking execution of Charles I. In his place, Oliver Cromwell, who led the opposition, took control as Lord Protector. Consequently, during this domestic chaos, Britain's colonial expansion in America had to take a back seat. But here's the twist. After Cromwell passed, his son took over and proved to be, well, pretty incompetent. This paved the way for the executed king's son, Charles II, to return and reclaim the throne. With the monarchy restored, Puritans faced persecution once again, sparking a massive wave of migration to the Americas. From the Carolinas, New York, and New Jersey, all the way to Georgia. This is how the famous 13 colonies were established. So, the big question is, why did these 13 colonies eventually rise up and fight a war of independence against Britain? Let's break it all down. With the restoration of the monarchy, a massive wave of British immigrants flooded into the East Coast, centered around Massachusetts. This is when the colonies really started to establish themselves permanently. From Virginia, the very first settlement, to Massachusetts, where the Puritans landed on the Mayflower, all the way down to Georgia in 1732, Britain established what we know today as the 13 colonies. And here's the interesting part. These colonies weren't all the same. They developed into 3 very distinct societies. First up, New England, centered around Massachusetts. Because of the cold weather and rocky soil, farming was tough there. Instead, they took advantage of the abundant timber and the coastline to build a booming fishing and shipbuilding industry. Also, since it was settled by Puritans, the society there was quite religiously conservative. Next, we have the Middle Colonies, anchored by New York and Pennsylvania. They were known as the breadbasket because they exported tons of wheat. Unlike the North, this region was religiously tolerant and diverse, becoming a melting pot of Quakers, Lutherans, and Catholics. Finally, the Southern colonies, led by Virginia and the Carolinas. Thanks to the fertile soil, they could grow massive cash crops on plantations. Many people came here strictly for economic reasons. The upper class, mostly Anglicans, were very proud of their British heritage and maintained strong ties to the motherland. Surprisingly, Britain kept a pretty loose leash on the colonies during this time. Sure, each colony had a king-appointed governor, but often even locals took on that role rather than someone sent from London. The settlers got used to running things themselves. They held elections to pick their officials and set up town councils to handle daily issues like policing, farming, and education. Over time, these elected assemblies became more powerful than the governors. This taste of self-rule was crucial. It laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the fight for independence. While this was happening, Spain and France were busy expanding their territories, and the Dutch joined the game too. Around 1620, seeking to cash in on the fur trade, they set up a trading post along the Hudson River and named it after their capital, New Amsterdam. As they expanded, there was one specific spot the Dutch merchants were desperate to get their hands on. After some bargaining, they bought it from the Native Americans for some trinkets and beads. That piece of land is what we now call Manhattan Island. Now get this, those beads and trinkets were worth about $24. Think about the insane real estate prices in Manhattan today per square foot. The Dutch bought the entire island for $24. Today, you couldn't even get a hostel bed near Central Park for that kind of money. But the Dutch didn't keep it for long. The British swooped in, seized control by force, and took over New Amsterdam. To honor the Duke of York, who supported the war, they renamed the city New York. While Britain was settling the 13 colonies, other European superpowers weren't just sitting around. With Britain, France, and Spain all crowding into eastern North America, turf wars over land were basically inevitable. Tensions really boiled over in the Ohio River Valley, leading to a full-blown war in 1756. Originally, this was French territory, where settlers lived peacefully alongside Native Americans. Britain essentially was the aggressor, trying to muscle in and take over. So when the fighting started, who did the Native Americans side with? France. They trusted the French, who treated them more like partners than enemies. This created a matchup of Britain versus France and their Native American allies. This 7-year conflict is what we call the French and Indian War. After 7 brutal years, Britain emerged victorious. As the winner, Britain seized vast territories in the Midwest from France, effectively taking control of almost all of eastern North America. But here is where the butterfly effect kicks in. This victory actually sowed the seeds for the American Revolution. War is expensive. After 7 years of fighting, Britain was drowning in debt. Raising taxes on citizens back in London was politically too risky, so the government decided, hey, let's just send the bill to the American colonies instead. Britain thought the colonies would be grateful for their protection. They expected a stronger bond. Instead, they accidentally triggered a massive tax war. Britain started slapping tariffs on imported goods like sugar, coffee, and wine. They specifically targeted sugar, which was in high demand, passing the infamous Sugar Act. Now, this wasn't just about having sweet coffee in the morning. The real problem, it crippled the production of rum and other spirits, which relied heavily on sugar. That was a huge blow to the local economy. But here's the thing. The sugar tax barely made a dent in Britain's massive debt, nor did it cover the cost of keeping troops in America. So the government got greedy. In 1765, they rolled out the Stamp Act. This act was ridiculous. It required virtually every piece of paper used in the colonies: newspapers, pamphlets, posters, legal contracts, even college diplomas, to carry a purchased British revenue stamp. They even taxed playing cards. Can you believe that? But the craziest one was the tax on lawyers' licenses. In today's money, that stamp alone would cost over $3,000. No wonder the lawyers were mad. The colonists were furious. Britain was taxing them without their consent. They finally drew a line in the sand and started protesting, refusing to pay the tax. This movement wasn't just for the elites. It brought everyone together: farmers, laborers, shopkeepers, and the working class. Their participation was a game changer. It was the first real step toward political unity and, eventually, independence. And the best part? It actually worked. The backlash was so intense that the British government eventually caved in and repealed the Stamp Act. But Britain just wouldn't let it go. They needed that money. So they cooked up a new plan, the Townshend Acts. This time they slapped import tariffs on everyday essentials coming from Britain: paper, glass, tea, lead, and paint. Taxing daily necessities, that was the last straw. The colonists were livid. Their argument was simple: we don't have anyone representing us in the British Parliament. Passing laws without our consent is illegal. They felt their fundamental rights as British subjects were being stripped away. Anti-British sentiment was reaching a boiling point, and from this anger, one of the most famous slogans in history was born: no taxation without representation. Interestingly, while similar ideas fueled the French Revolution later, America said it first. Once this slogan hit the London Magazine in 1768, it became the rallying cry for the colonies, lighting the spark that would eventually lead to the Revolutionary War. In response to the Townshend Acts, the colonies hit back where it hurt. They boycotted British goods. The backlash was so fierce that Britain, fearing widespread riots, repealed the taxes on everything, except for one thing: tea. But then trouble brewed from an unexpected place. The British East India Company was on the verge of bankruptcy. To bail them out, the British government passed the Tea Act. Now, this wasn't really about raising taxes. It was about allowing the East India Company to sell tea directly to the colonies at a bargain price. While that sounds good for drinkers, it was a disaster for local merchants. They couldn't compete with those undercut prices and faced total bankruptcy. The merchants were furious, sparking another massive boycott. In most ports, colonists refused to let the tea ships even dock. But in Boston, the British governor insisted on forcing the ships to unload their cargo. And that standoff led to the legendary event of 1773, the Boston Tea Party. Hearing that the tea would be unloaded by force, a group of colonists disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians to hide their identities. They boarded the ships and dumped every single crate of tea into the harbor. They destroyed about 9,700 pounds sterling worth of tea. That's roughly $1.7 million in today's money. By the way, if you visit Boston today, there's a replica ship where you can actually reenact this. You can throw the crates into the water yourself. Don't worry, they're attached to ropes so you can pull them back up. The British government was absolutely livid at the colonists' defiance. To punish them, they played their hardest card yet. They passed the Coercive Acts, or, as the Americans famously call them, the Intolerable Acts. Here's what they demanded. 1. The port of Boston would be completely closed until the colonists paid for every ounce of the ruined tea. 2. The king took direct control, appointing the governor's council and sheriffs, effectively stripping their self-governance. 3. Any British official or soldier accused of a crime would be tried back in England, not in the colonies. And 4. The Quartering Act, which forced colonists to provide housing for British troops if needed. The strategy was simple: isolate Boston from the other colonies and crush their spirit with legal sanctions. But here's where it all backfired. Instead of isolating Boston, these harsh measures enraged everyone. It completely blew up in Britain's face. The other colonies realized if we don't fight now, we're next. They saw this as a direct threat to their liberty. The sentiment was clear: we built this life in a new world, and now British aristocrats and the king want to treat us like subjects without rights. To respond to this threat, history was made in September 1774. 55 delegates from the colonies gathered to form the First Continental Congress. The room was filled with heavy hitters: George Washington, who would become the first president, John Adams, the future second president, and Samuel Adams. This was the first time a unified body truly represented the voice of the American colonies. They took a stand. They adopted a declaration denying Parliament's right to interfere in their internal affairs and sent a petition to the king demanding the repeal of the Intolerable Acts. But Britain doubled down. They declared Massachusetts to be in a state of rebellion, banned trade with other nations, and even stripped away their fishing rights in the North Atlantic, their main source of income. Pushed to the brink, there was no turning back. The stage was set. The War of Independence had begun. Strictly speaking, the Revolutionary War was a conflict fought within the 13 British colonies on the East Coast. But remember, the map was crowded. France and Spain held massive territories surrounding them, and the Native American nations in the interior were a powerful force to be reckoned with. This complex geopolitical puzzle created a lot of chaos for British policymakers. But here's the massive dilemma Britain faced. They had no viable way to actually rule America. A war needs a clear, achievable goal. You can fix bad tactics or a messy operation, but if the fundamental purpose of your war is flawed, there is no fixing that. The coercive laws they tried to enforce weren't just a question of right or wrong, they were physically impossible to enforce. Sending an army to uphold unenforceable laws made the war unwinnable from the very start. Now, textbooks usually tell us the rebellion was all about taxes, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, and British oppression, but there is a much deeper, more fundamental root cause. Think about it. If a British person moved to India or Egypt back then, they didn't say, "I'm going to become Indian or Egyptian." No, they wanted to stay British, to keep that royal protection. But America? Completely different story. The settlers here stopped being British subjects and started becoming Americans. Remember, this wasn't British society moving overseas. These were the outcasts, the people who were persecuted in or hated Britain. Plus, there was the religion gap. Britain was Anglican. If you weren't Anglican, you weren't considered a real citizen. This naturally created a psychological split. You aren't one of us. So any loyalty Americans felt toward Britain was mostly just nostalgia, a fading memory. And we all know that kind of sentimental loyalty snaps the moment money or politics get in the way. They had built their own society, their own systems. They were already living in a different world. Also, here's a crucial realization. During the French and Indian War, the colonists noticed something. The mighty British army wasn't invincible in the American wilderness. European tactics didn't work in these forests. Seeing that weakness gave them the guts to fight back. Finally, the demographics were the nail in the coffin. It wasn't just English people. You had Scots, Irish, people who had no love for London. When they arrived, the British often pushed them to the dangerous frontier as a buffer against Native Americans, not exactly a way to win their loyalty. Then came the non-English speakers, Germans, Dutch, you name it. With German towns, Dutch towns, and Irish towns, calling the 13 colonies British became just a technicality. With such a melting pot of cultures, the emotional bond to the motherland was basically non-existent. We all know Patrick Henry's legendary cry in Virginia, "Give me liberty or give me death." It's the symbol of the revolution. But historians still debate if he actually said it exactly like that. The real argument that moved people wasn't just abstract heroism, it was pragmatic. Taxation violates our liberty. It wasn't just about dying for freedom, it was about fighting to protect their property, their happiness, and their communities. That is the true, practical essence of the Declaration of Independence.